You probably have never heard of Elisabeth Wehling, a research assistant at Berkeley University. I don't know who funds her, but I have seen her on a number of TV shows. She sneaked in, drops some tactics, and leaves without stirring some controversy of any sort. And one wonders why she is invited again and again, because she has no real qualifications and everything she says is a repetition of her previous appearances. It is all about what is framing. Framing means you can use different words to describe the same thing, and some sound good and others sound bad. That is as boring and as ordinary as it gets. You don't need a specialist to say this. In any event, she claims that conservatives were doing this framing tactic excessively, and she's quoting a number of think tanks like the Heritage Foundation, and is accusing particularly the US American Party of doing this, and says that the left now has to fight back. And I have noticed this trick for some time now. It is always claimed that the right has somehow attacked, and the examples are ludicrous. They are usually just phrases that every ordinary citizen had used for centuries sometimes, at least for a very long period, and then Elisabeth Wehling comes along and claims that it was strategically placed by the right to manipulate the conversation. And now that the right supposedly had attacked, we have to shoot back. Or we, the left, have to fight back. I just wanted to quote Hitler. Sorry. Since 5 o'clock in the morning, we shoot back. So this is her mindset. She claims that conservatives have attacked, which is a lie, and then she ushers the left to fight back. And now the ARD, our public broadcaster, the equivalent of the BBC, the CBC in Canada, or the PBS in America, has asked her to write a report or an assessment or whatever, a paper, on how they can manipulate the public and specifically ask people to accept the mandatory fees. It starts by saying that we may not even call it mandatory fees because they are merely contributions, mandatory contributions, and this is quite funny to read, so I will. So if you disagree to call contributions that are mandatory something like fees, taxes, or whatever you would actually call something that is mandatory, you are something like this. Some members of our society don't abide to the democratic over-generational decision to a shared free broadcaster ARD. They question the binding character of a democratic decision. They behave anti-democratically. As I've noticed in previous posts and videos, anti-democratic comes up in Germany again and again and again. There are multiple words, and the word she is using here is remote from democracy. So if you dare to disagree with a fee, a mandatory fee, you are anti-democratic, because in a previous cycle or some generations ago, the parliament made a decision and you are not allowed to ask society to reverse that decision through another parliamentarian act or other act. She confirms this notion by saying, because they withhold the democratically agreed on contributions from the broadcasters, we are somewhat outside democracy. And she will come to this later, but I will pick this one right now. the entire propaganda in Germany at the moment is really based on framing things as if communism was the most natural state of society and capitalism just came in between. So everything is framed as, just be cautious, just be nice, be chummy, share with other people, and so on and so on. So this is presented as something on a very basic human level. Apes can understand this kind of talk. We all contribute. We all just, stick together, are binding our family, friends, and so on and so on. But the villain, of course, must be ostracized, and he is accused of all kind of mischievous activities. So she alleges, in his mind, he hides under the carpet the fact that the contribution denier acts directly against a binding democratic agreement which is rooted in law and that the rest of us keeps. So it appeals to the very basic notion of fairness. The rest of us keeps the agreement, and these bastards who disagree, who say they want to pay a tax less, these bastards, these anti-tax villains, do not feel bound by the agreement. Sorry. Then she makes an argument that I hear very often in Germany, and as she phrases it, it makes no sense. So I introduce first the argument that I hear very often, and that is, if we do not force the citizenry to pay for the public broadcast, if we don't pay their salaries, then they are chained to the market. And this is anti-democratic, and this somehow limits their freedom. And the citizen is supposed to feel unfree because those, these perfect media people and artists that never produce a movie that is translated into English. Or do you remember the last German Harry Potter or whatever, 50 Shades of Grey? Anything that you would care about? I don't. And the reason really is that all of our media is now propaganda, and including arts, and it has been for decades now. It is just intensifying. She writes, it is a medial disempowerment of the citizen to make it dependent on the undemocratic commercial broadcaster. As I mentioned, this makes little sense. She actually means that they feel chained to the market forces, which is actually the citizen. The citizen can decide if he wants to watch this or that show, and this is the market. But she claims that the market is somehow a tyrannic force, and the citizen gets disempowered if he has a say into what shows should be continued because of the interest of the citizens. Then it gets cheesy. If you try to explain to your co-citizens, we'll continue in a second, I translate Mitbürger with co-citizens because it sounds more chummy, and it is supposed to sound chummy, and this is what her framing means. You can say citizen, and it means the same as co-citizen if you are a citizen of the same country. So you don't add actually new information, you just say something that is supposed to sound more family, tribe, you use something that is that apes can understand. So I start again. If you try to explain to your co-citizen the tasks and goals of the ARD, and if you defend it against the orchestrated attacks from opponents, your communication should not have the form of factual arguments, but always be on moral frames which lend urgency to the facts that you find important and interprets them from your perspective and not from the perspective of your opponent. She continues with what I just began to say. Use basic level language whenever possible. Everything you do, touch, feel, taste, smell, or hear is on the basic level. Everything that you know from everyday life is on the basic level. Solidarity, and here she uses actually an adjective that is based on the word solidarity, but it doesn't exist in English, is outside the basic level. Hand in hand is not. The rule of thumb is the more specific, the better. Then she goes right in, exemplifying this with family members, that you should actually talk about your own family members and how you watch shows with them together and how something reminds you of your own childhood and how it somehow helped you understand your parents' lives better because of the history feature films. So she writes, name favorite shows of your parents. Say that you grew up with the children's TV shows, The Show with the Mouse and the Sandman. She also advises to repeat ideologically coherent messages, and she does not say ideologically because that the word ideology is framed itself as negative. Is negatively framed, sorry. And she rather uses the word moral, and this is something we have come to know in the recent years anyway. We are not against moral, we are just against how ideology is presented as on a very basic level, as something that every society would live by anyway. So communism is just something that every citizen would agree with anyway. It's just being kind. So the maximum framing effect is achieved if you pay attention to moral cohesion. It is done by keeping the fundamental perspective on the community and one's own role in it, from debate to debate, and in the form of identical wording or in the form of slightly linguistic realizations, of slightly deviating linguistic realizations which derive from one recurring fundamental framing. As empirical studies show, if an institution communicates coherently in this way, your co-citizens gain trust in it. They see that again and again, in varying contexts, the same moral principles are addressed, and learn that they can rely on these principles today and tomorrow. The created trust and conveyed integrity leads to a general and long-lasting appreciation and attachment to the institution in the minds of the people. It is also very worrying that she uses that she suggests the slogan rather a controlled democracy than everybody doing what he wants. I believe that freedom is very strongly connected to everybody doing what he wants, and I wonder how she fights against freedom itself. But on the other hand, somebody who recurs on TV shows again and again to just say the same things all over is most likely very underqualified. It's very likely that she has no better job opportunities. She's dependent on Berkeley, and she is a propaganda stooge for probably some billionaire. I won't say George Soros because I don't know, but it is likely that she is on some scholarship from some interested person. That was it for today, and I see you soon. Bye.